Hello and welcome to this webinar about the Streamlined Contracting with NGOs project. This webinar is an overview of the different documents and tools that make up the new NGO contracting framework. If this is your first introduction to the Streamlined Contracting with NGOs project, you may find it useful to watch the project overview video first, as the video will give you more background and context to the development of the documents and tools that we'll be looking at in this session. In this webinar, we'll go through the framework and explain what the different documents and tools are, how they're used and what they mean. Understanding the documents and tools and how to use them is essential if you work in a government agency and you purchase social, health, justice or education services from NGOs, and if you work for an NGO that provides those services to government. By the end of this webinar, you'll know what the different contracting documents are, how they fit together, and how they're used. This webinar will take approximately 50 minutes to watch from start to finish. It is in 3 parts, which you can watch separately or in one go. Whether you choose to watch all 3 parts at once or come back for a second and third parts another time, it's important that you watch the entire webinar so that you get a full picture of how the contracting framework works. If you're a government agency and will be developing outcome agreements with NGOs, this webinar will give you the information you need to know before you come along to the workshop, where you'll put what you've learnt into practice. Let's start by recapping on what the Streamlined Contracting with NGOs project is all about. The aim of this project is to develop a consistent approach to how government agencies contract with NGOs to deliver social, health, justice and education services that reduces the compliance burden on NGOs created by current inconsistent approaches. It'll make the contracting process quicker and easier by having standard documents and templates that are used when contracting for those services. It's about freeing up resources so that more effort and funding is directed to delivering frontline services that make a positive difference to the people who use them. Using the new contracting tools and documents will assist agencies and NGOs to work together better and in a more coordinated and efficient way, as the new framework is focused on collaboration and coordination. We'll look at how it works shortly. Using the new contracting framework will also increase our focus on outcomes. The documents are written to guide agencies and NGOs to doing and measuring the things that make a difference, and not just counting activity. Let's begin by looking at the contracting framework and how it works. Before getting into the detail, it's worth clarifying what a few commonly used terms are. We'll be using these terms throughout the remainder of the presentation. Services means social, health, justice, education, or any other services a purchasing agency buys from a provider. Agency means any government purchasing agency who buys services from a provider. CF means the documents comprising the Streamlined Contracting Framework. MBIE is the short form name of the Ministry of Business, Innovation and Employment. When we use MBIE during this presentation, we're talking in the context of the MBIE's role as a coordinating agency. And finally, when we use the term provider, we mean a NGO who provides services under contract to an agency. The contracting framework is made up of 5 different tools and documents that are used in the contracting process. You need to be familiar with all 5 of these tools and documents to be able to use the contracting framework. The Government Agency Agreement is a contractual agreement between government agencies and MBIE. It describes how agencies will work together when they contract with NGOs. Agencies agree to abide by this document whenever they enter into an agreement for social services. It's focused on agencies working together to contract with NGOs in a consistent and efficient manner. In this webinar, we'll go through the main parts of the Government Agency Agreement, explaining what they mean and what the obligations of the parties are. The framework terms and conditions are the standard terms and conditions that apply to the outcome agreements between government agencies and providers. They're incorporated by reference into each outcome agreement. These terms and conditions set out the obligations of the agency and the provider, and they must be complied with while the services are being delivered. In this webinar, we'll go through the main parts of the framework terms and conditions, explaining what they mean and what the obligations of the parties are. The Decision Support Tool is an Excel-based tool designed to help agencies identify and manage risks when they contract with NGOs. The Decision Support Tool will help agencies use the most appropriate contracting and contract management approaches to manage the risks they have identified. In this webinar, we'll give you an overview of how to use the tool to guide your decision-making. The Outcome Agreement is the contract between the agency and the provider. The Outcome Agreement details the services being purchased, pricing, and reporting. The framework terms and conditions are incorporated by reference into each Outcome Agreement. The Outcome Agreement can also be used to document changes to the standard position on who owns intellectual property and sharing confidential information. More than one agency can be party to an Outcome Agreement. In other words, an Outcome Agreement can be between a provider and more than one agency, with each agency contracting for a specific part of the services. We'll look at this in more detail later, but bear it in mind as we go through the framework. In this webinar, we'll give you an overview of the Outcome Agreement and show you which parts you need to complete. The Outcome Agreement Management Plan is a template for a contract management plan which agencies and providers can choose to use. It doesn't contain any contractual obligations. Having an Outcome Agreement Management Plan isn't mandatory, but it is encouraged because it helps both the agency and the provider meet their obligations and achieve the outcomes in the agreement. In this webinar, we'll give you an overview of the Outcome Agreement Management Plan and show you how to use it. Together, the Government Agency Agreement, Framework Terms and Conditions, Outcome Agreement, Outcome Management Plan, and the Decision Support Tool make up the contracting framework. The first part of this webinar will look at the Government Agency Agreement. The second part will look at the Framework Terms and Conditions, and the third and final part will look at the Decision Support Tool, Outcome Agreement, and Outcome Agreement Management Plan. Let's take a look at the Government Agency Agreement. The Government Agency Agreement is a contract between each agency and MBIE. It describes the commitments between agencies and MBIE when they contract to purchase services from any NGO. It is focused on obligations of collaboration, coordination, and consistency. The provider is not party to the Government Agency Agreement. So, what does it say? The Government Agency Agreement is an important part of the contracting framework because it records the commitments that each agency and MBIE make to each other that will assist them collectively reduce the duplication of contract management effort by agencies, which in turn should reduce the compliance burden on providers. Its purpose is to support a structured adoption of the contracting framework by highlighting key areas for the agencies, such as consistency of approach, coordination, and collaboration, and setting expectations for the way agencies will approach those areas in future. MBIE is the coordinating agency and has an important role to play in assisting agencies improve their contracting and contract management practices. Under the GAA, MBIE will assist agencies transition to the contracting framework, provide the tools, templates, and training that agencies and providers need to use this contracting framework, help agencies who are working with the same provider collaborate and share information by keeping a register of outcome agreements and planned audits and monitoring, review and update the contracting framework documents so they can be used by a wide range of agencies. The next section of the Government Agency Agreement, called Agency Commitments, is about how agencies will work with each other and with providers. The collaboration section requires agencies to communicate with each other about the services they need and identify opportunities for collaboration. In addition, agencies should work with providers to try to coordinate the timing and content of regular reporting, special inquiries, and statutory audit requirements to reduce the disruption and cost to providers wherever possible. The Consistency and Approach section requires agencies to take a consistent approach to risk assessment and management. They should use the Decision Support Tool, DST, to identify, assess, manage, and mitigate risks. Discuss their DST assessment with the provider. Only add extra conditions into an outcome agreement if necessary to manage or mitigate identified risks, and explain why they require information from the provider. Picking up on the collaboration obligations mentioned on the previous slide, agencies should attempt to consolidate their reporting and information requests of the provider to minimise the effort required to comply with such requests. Where this has not yet happened, those agencies should share their reporting and monitoring information about the providers so that agencies minimise their requests for bespoke reporting or additional information from the provider to reduce the compliance burden of those requests. If any new intellectual property is created as a result of performing the services, then agencies should consider whether the new IP is worth sharing outside the parties to the outcome agreement, and if so, discuss it with the provider and document it in the outcome agreement. The last part of this section is about when agencies are expected to talk to each other. Here we can see that more than one agency is party to the outcome agreement. In this situation, the agencies are expected to tell each other and ideally consult with each other. If one of them wants to recover from, reduce or suspend payments to a provider, or wants to terminate or stop participating in the outcome agreement. It's worth remembering that agencies only need to consult if their actions are likely to adversely impact the other agencies. This primarily impacts the agency providing the majority of funding, as their actions are likely to create more ripples for the provider and other agencies. In this situation, agencies have different outcome agreements with the same provider. Here, agencies are expected to tell each other if they want to do something that might impact on the other outcome agreements in place. That includes telling each if one of them wants to vary the outcome agreement or has a dispute with the provider, or wants to recover from, reduce or suspend payments to a provider, or wants to terminate their outcome agreement. Again, the impact of this clause will be felt most by the agency that provides the majority of funding to the provider. The next section of the Government Agency Agreement is about the roles and responsibilities of agencies and MBIE as the coordinating agency. Each agency agrees to manage their outcome agreements in line with the 2011 Kia Tutahi Standing Together Relationship Accord between the Government of New Zealand and communities of Aotearoa, New Zealand. Each agency also agrees to manage their outcome agreements in line with the relationship principles embedded in the framework terms and conditions. The Roles and Responsibilities section explains the roles and responsibilities of the MBIE and agencies. Under those roles and responsibilities, MBIE will communicate and liaise with agencies to help them work together and facilitate the coordination, the audit, monitoring and reporting programs, while agencies agree to give MBIE the information they need to help them facilitate the audit, reporting and monitoring programs, collaborate with each other and work with providers in a consistent and coordinated way, and comply with their obligations under this Government Agency Agreement. MBIE will review the contracting templates at least once every 3 years and will consult with both agencies and a range of providers when doing that review. This is to ensure that the all-important element of co-design of the contracting framework is maintained. So, to recap, the Government Agency Agreement is between agencies and MBIE. It covers how MBIE will help agencies transition into the new contracting framework and work together better and share relevant information for the benefit of both agencies and the provider. When agencies sign this agreement, they commit to treating their providers in a consistent manner and working together by collaborating, joining up their reporting and special inquiry requirements wherever possible, and telling each other when they want to do something that might impact on another agency. Agencies also agree to identifying and assessing risks consistently and share information with each other wherever possible, so that outcome agreements are managed in a consistent way. All of this is aimed at reducing the duplication of contract management activity by agencies and in turn reducing the compliance burden agencies impose on providers. That's the Government Agency Agreement and the end of the first part of this webinar. The second part of this webinar will take a closer look at the framework terms and conditions.